Hey, this video is about the flip-flop maneuver of fatty acid entry into cells and diabetes, but I'm real quick just going to show you this one picture. This is the magic bathroom at my old house, but the new house and the apartment, it's the same thing. Basically, it's good for reading scientific papers. I used to mostly read textbooks, for number twos and little paperbacks or something for number ones, but it's really good for reading scientific papers. I'm finding it's the best place because when I read on a treadmill, that's good for books because you don't want to be holding a paper on a treadmill. In a car, I listen to an audiobook. At night when I'm on the computer, I'm usually watching a video. So the bathroom is the magic bathroom. You got to put this little table in. You just move it with your foot. Is the best way to read scientific papers. For those of us who are real busy, I got a full-time job, okay? I can't just be sitting on my ass reading all the time. I wish I could. Some rich person could sponsor me. I'll make new big discoveries. Anyways, here is a paper by Anthony J. James Hamilton. This one's a 2020 paper, and they get more and more sophisticated, but they've been writing these papers back since the 1990s, and I'm going to show you one of them in a moment about the flip-flop maneuver, whereby a fatty acid, which might initially be ionized, has dissociated from its hydrogen, then picks up a hydrogen and intercalates, incorporates itself into the outer leaflet of the plasma membrane of a cell, like a skeletal muscle cell, and then it flips. So that's what's meant by the flip-flop. It flip-flops into the inner leaflet, and then it comes into the cytoplasm. Once it comes into the cytoplasm, this hydrogen proton will dissociate. The relevance is that dissociation of the proton acidifies the cytoplasm. So it acidifies the cytoplasm, and that acidification means a drop in the pH of the cytoplasm. When the pH of the cytoplasm drops, that then inhibits glycolysis because the glycolysis enzyme phosphofructokinase, PFK, is very sensitive to a drop in pH. So that blocks glycolysis, which contributes to insulin resistance, which contributes to causing diabetes. This is why fat causes diabetes. The fat will also have an inhibitory effect upon electron transport inside the inner mitochondrial membrane. But what I'm trying to show you is if you go to 99.9% of MDs, they don't know this. This is the most important thing you can know about diabetes. You can't stop the fat from getting into the cell. And once it gets into the cell, it inhibits glycolysis, inhibits electron transport. It screws up metabolism of carbohydrate in the cell, and thus causes insulin resistance. You can't get the glucose into the skeletal muscle cell when normally most of it goes after you eat, postprandial, so it then stays in the blood. And now you got persistent, prolonged, severe hyperglycemia. That's diabetes, okay? This is big stuff. What I'm telling you, this is Nobel Prize stuff, but nobody's ever heard of it because they don't want you to know about it. You've heard of Banting and Best invented insulin because they can sell that as a drug, but you don't ever hear about this because it teaches you how type 2 diabetics could easily cure themselves, okay? By stop eating all this fat, and why all the paleo keto carnivores are a bunch of BS artists, and the Mediterranean diet high-fat phonies are full of crap too, telling you to eat 40% fat. The cures for type 2 diabetes were with low-fat plant-based diets, okay? Preferably below 10%, but at least below 15%. The master in diabetes guys like Bobby Bittero, Cyrus Kumbada, they'll say, keep it below 15% your total fat. I would say even better, keep it below 10%. McDougall's diet was about 7%. Esselstyn's was less than 10%. And, this has been shown. Okay, so here's another paper by James Hamilton. Changes in the internal pH caused by the movement of fatty acids into and out of pancreatic beta cells. These are clonal pancreatic beta cells. Okay, so as soon as you add the fat, and they did it with oleic acid. They did it with, with both a MUFA and with a saturated fat, palmitic acid as well. The pH effect can be explained by passive diffusion, flip-flop maneuver of an unionized fatty acid. That means when the hydrogen's still attached, going across the plasma membrane, because that makes it hydrophobic, so it'll be able to travel in oil, essentially, in lipid. And then once it's across, the hydrogen comes off, acidifying the plasma, acidifying the cytoplasm. Okay. And this paper says these results show that fatty acid movement into cells occurs predominantly via passive diffusion by the flip-flop maneuver of the unionized form across the plasma membrane. Okay, that's big stuff. All right, just here's another detail from the paper. Acidification of the interior of the beta cells of the pancreas, for example, following the addition of fatty acid may be explained by the fatty acid movement across the plasma membrane, according to the mechanism proposed by Camp and Hamilton. Fatty acids are highly water insoluble, but they do bind avidly to membranes like plasma membranes, initially to the outer leaflet. Upon binding the phospholipid bilayer, the fatty acid becomes 50% ionized, but 50% is unionized, and that undergoes a rapid flip-flop maneuver into the inner leaflet. followed by deprotonation, loss of its proton, and that acidifies the cytoplasm of the cell. The key regulatory enzyme of glycolysis, phosphofructokinase, is very sensitive to pH changes. A decrease in pH potentiates inhibition of the enzyme by ATP, so excess energy also inhibited. And a small pH change of just 0.1 unit can decrease enzyme activity by a factor of 2 or more. Thus, the inhibition of glycolysis by increased supply of fatty acids to the tissue may be due in part to changes in intracellular pH caused by fatty acid movement into the cell. The reason I'm going through this too is I'm going to show you additional papers in the near future that I've been reading about preservatives and effects of fat on tissue. So this is all, I'm building up to bigger and better stuff, but this is key. This is the key to diabetes. This is how diabetics could cure themselves, type 2, if they had a brain in their head. The extreme elevation of plasma fatty acids in diabetes also contributes to glucose intolerance through this mechanism of inhibiting glucose metabolism. So there it is. You can't stop the fatty acid from coming into the cell because it's not dependent on a protein carrier that you could inhibit with a drug. It just comes across on its own across the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle cell, thus inducing insulin resistance. The number one earliest discoverable finding in diabetes, insulin resistance, is accumulation of fat in skeletal muscle. And this explains why. The flip-flop maneuver across the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle cell. This is awesome stuff. Trust me, this is big Nobel Prize stuff. And this is how simple it is. And it's been known since the 1990s.